Welcome back. You're watching Ugozi today here on Morning Prime. We continue our pace with the conversation, holding court with Kipruto Arap Kirwa, who is a politician, also former Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture. We have with us as well Professor Gitile Naitoli, who is a leadership and management professor at Multimedia University and also the executive director of Kenya National Civil Society Congress. This is Churchill Suba. Even as we of course, looking at deeply on what is really happening with the IEBC, would there be a vacuum if this thing really steamrolls and goes to the full, of course, logical extent of it, given now by January, Chebukati and the Troika that we know and the other two commissioners will actually be there on terminal leave as it is right now? Is it so? No,
I think Ruto will move with the speed. Ruto is not Uhuru Kenyatta. Uhuru Kenyatta took 2 years, full 2 years to fill the 4 spaces after those commissioners resigned, therefore. To replace them, a whole 2 years. There was no reason for that. Ruto will replace, if this happens, if the process works it out, he will very quickly have that tribunal. Tribunal will have a deadline, I think is there, it's set in the law. The moment he receives that report and the tribunal recommends that they leave, Ruto will appoint a panel to start recruiting immediately. Within a month, by February, the commissioner will be seated. The way he works is works with his speed. So if there's a vacuum, probably a month after the month that you will be occupied by recruitment. But otherwise, it's going to move with incredible speed unless there is lawsuits and so on, which may delay the process. But if you know how Ruto works, he will work with a lot of speed on this one.
So my question was, again,
vacuum.
Yeah, the vacuum between now and the exit of Chebukati. If this is really steamrolled, how close also is the boundaries review?
But you realize there's already a vacuum. These people are already being run by being accused, standing in trial as it were right now. They have already been
stalled, sort of. So they cannot really work.
Yeah. They can't really work. So there is already one. And those people also 4 months, they're leaving office, the other 3. Okay? So there is already a problem, if as it were. But what I'm trying to say is that office will be empty for a maximum, in my opinion, of 2 months. Between now and February. Between now and by February, I can guarantee you the commissioners will be seated. Unless, of course, the opposition organizes the way they are doing, and they insist on a method of filling those slots. Because I'm now beginning to see that Raila dissents when he was saying that the political parties actually nominate. Because there is a nomination for the commissioners, it's a political process. Whether we fool ourselves that there is LOCK representative, there is, the church, and then remember how they pretended, the last recruitment, that panel pretended that is doing an open recruitment. But they end up getting who is who in the anti-checking government. So I think Raila is right. We probably should allow the political parties to nominate people to oversee elections. That way we drop the pretense that they are non-aligned when we can see clearly. The problem right now is that they were aligned. They were aligned, they identified themselves. They took positions when they shouldn't have taken any positions, because they should have stuck with the country, stick with the elections, all of them, without, the entire team should have put the country first and it stayed there. They didn't. So if the process, if Raila's process, for example, proposal is adopted, then they can fill those in a week. They can fill the positions in a week. If the pretense of this independent thing is dropped because it's a pretense, then we will have no vacuum. But it will look to me that you are right, there wouldn't be a vacuum. How long is what I'm saying, that it cannot exceed 2 months, and not with William Ruto. It will not exceed February.
You know why I'm worried about a possible vacuum, Madibala?
Yes.
You know, we have vacancies arising from members of parliament resigning to take up cabinet slots. And that's why we cannot afford a vacuum at IEBC.
Yes.
Other than the boundary reviews, the constitution is very clear, the electoral laws.
Yes.
when the seats must be declared vacant, when by-elections must be held, unless there is, an emergency. And for me, the 4 commissioners is not an emergency. And that's why for me, Chebukati, hero or no hero, has now to be on his terminal leave. I'm told he's hyperactive, promoting and demoting and doing all manner of things. And of course, reshaping the secretariat in the image and likeness of those who have crowned him with the title of being a hero. But we know, and the Standard did a commendable job, letting the public know how the recruitment during Chebukati's time happened. And some of the discussions that some people are highly placed in the current Kenya Kwanza had about each individual nominee. And we remember the Honorable Aden Duale saying that he expressed reservations about Akombe's appointment. And saying, are you sure this person who has been working with the UN, And all that, the Standard covered it very well. The Standard Media Group even gave us the marks each of them scored. That is how we got to know as Kenyans that Chebukati was leading from the bottom.
Yeah, in the 67, it was very far.
Very far. Was not anywhere being qualified or suitable.
Yeah,
yet
the
same religious leaders that we prefer trusting are the ones that presented his name. I don't know whether their intention was to influence the hand of the president to appoint the best, or to consider this one who was leading from the bottom up, because we now have bottom up. So it was scandalous. The appointment of Chebukati and company, scandalous, to say the least. Now we have had this 4, but what I know is that removing commissioners is not that easy. These are constitutional office holders. Already we have seen controversies at the level of parliament. Mm-hmm. There are people who are even wondering why parliament is conducting a hearing. If it is for the basis of recommending, to the president is an interested party. The MPs pushing this agenda are interested parties. The petitioners are interested parties. But that is not to say that it's going to be a walk in the park. Kenya Kwanza may have the numbers, but it's not as easy as they may think. It's going, in the words of the current speaker, it's going to be messy, noisy,
and with the consequences.
And with consequences. And already it is playing out there. So this country cannot afford any vacuum at any point, because those by-elections in Kandara, in Garissa
Central
Township, and in Elgeyo Marakwet must be conducted within a stipulated time. That, unfortunately, the heroic Chebukati cannot preside over, and can only be presided over by the 4. Even as the process of their supposed presumption of guilty until proved innocent, is underway. But I've already told you that, and I've already, thrown out things that will play out there. And I'm glad that, the Honorable Kirwa is saying that, their graduation was postponed for 2 weeks to coincide with certain dates. Now, these are the people who are supposed to investigate state capture. And so on and so forth. I've already told you about certain coincidences at Bomas of Kenya, at the Tallying Center. And I asked myself, have I not heard this song being sung to us here? Where did I hear it? In the campaign rallies? It is now, the composers are now here. And some people in Azimio think they are going to be declared winners. Everything was stage managed. Now those who raised alarm and blew the whistle on this stage managing are the ones being fault-finded. But I've already said that public service, we all celebrated the accountant at Masai Mara University who blew the whistle about, misappropriation of public funds. Why not the commissioners? There are so many provisions in this constitution that the 4 can use to explain themselves. That first and foremost, they are part of the Kenyans being urged to defend and protect this constitution. And when they saw things not happening right, and they were vindicated by the Supreme Court that, they had been sidelined by the Chebukati and the...
But a question for you, because now, why can't we have a follow-through also from the recruitment processes? Right when we put this, in publication, and we have shortlisted, we're going for these particular interviews, and also, since it has been in the public gallery, we also know the scores. That it doesn't have to take, maybe the media house to try and give some of, the grades that they got from this particular, some of the points they scored from this particular interview, so that the public knows who topped and who was tanking in that particular interview, and what sort of discretion was used to actually give that particular seat or that particular position to so and so.
Let's hear
maybe
from
one
of the applicants.
Leadership and management professor will actually be very ideal now to tell us.
You're asking that question because you believe in fairness.
Yeah.
And you think when people actually present themselves, they are listened, the way they answer those questions, and the marks are awarded by the weight of your answers to those questions. That's not what happens. You are told to apply. Remember, this fellow was saying, if nobody asks you to apply for, don't bother.
Yeah.
Because you form the panel, then you call the panel and give them a list of the name to bring to you. What will happen is those people will lead in the marks, regardless of what any other brilliant Kenyan comes.
But if the interview is carried in the public, every Kenyan will see. Will be able to see. Just as we saw also with the CSS, and people made their own recommendations and say,
yes,
so and so is really suited to the ground to be on this particular set.
The last time there was a public interview on IEBC, the networks asked people, who do you think was the best? The people voted through the networks. None of those people who appeared, the KTN, the NTV, Citizen, none of them eventually was nominated. Okay, so what happens here is very simple. You quote unquote form an impartial panel, and then you give the panel the list of the people they need to return it to you. So the whole interview is a charade usually. But when
so there's a list already given.
The list is already given.
So you just go through the exercise.
You just go through the exercise to obey the law.
The standard coverage was very interesting. The disparity of marks that panelists were awarding to each it was so huge.
Yeah.
In fact, you need to dig out that copy of the standard.
We should, yeah.
Because they said, if these people were assessing the same person, listened to his answers to the same questions, how come one individual? So what the professor is saying is quite true. Because that is reflected in the story that the standard, a very detailed reporting and coverage of the debacle that was recruitment of Chebukati and company. Yes.
Professor, finish.
Yes, so that's what I'm saying. I want to agree with Raila that we drop the pretense here of the independent, okay? And we get the players, which is the political parties, now nominating people to represent them. Of course, when they go there, they also have to represent all of us. And we may actually get more robust. We may very well get better representation that way. Because also, the political parties, in there, they have to have the mechanisms where they can probably get the best within themselves in there. But the recruitment on the pretense that you will be dependent because it was advertised is not correct, because people are told you apply this one. And then they set up the systems to bring you back because they already identified you. And they have done that with all the advertisements actually they have done, especially under Jubilee administration. During Kibaki administration, you actually applied for a job, no one knows you, you went, you did the interview, and you were hired during the Kibaki. But the moment the Jubilee came in, that was thrown through the window, and I have reason to believe that nothing is going to change right now in regard to that. What they are doing is they obey the law because they must obey the process.
Yes.
Okay? And the Kenyans are very faithful. They continue applying all the time. They apply, they get shortlisted, but the thing is already gone. It is the Jubilee that has turning down what this constitution intended
Thank you.
to stop.
All right. Unless you have anything to add, I wanted just to take the conversation towards just the same thing that we're talking about, appointment, and now the case that we have with the permanent secretaries and the CSs as well.
Yeah.
Well, it's also the feeling or the understanding of so many that the courts might be overplaying their hands in terms of, separation of powers. Are they overreaching in terms of making, that decision that the PS's appointment should not be carried through? Because that's the sort of interference. We have the executive, we have the parliament, and this is a sole preserve of parliament as it is right now. Yes, there are issues to do with ethnic balances, but where do we have, the separation of powers between, the courts or the judiciary and parliament right now? I think that is a huge debate.
Yeah, it is a huge debate, given the fact that since 1963, there has been this competition among the three arms of government, where at times the executive has been reigning supreme. At some stage, during Kibaki time, almost parliament overran the other two arms of government, because I think Kibaki was sort of such a freedom giver that parliament almost went rogue. I was part of Kibaki 1. And thanks to people who believe in building institutions, like the former MP for Alego Songa, Peter Castro Oluwaringo, is the single person who managed to build the Parliamentary Service Commission as it is today. Because I remember in one of the remarks, he told me, Kirwa, I want you not to decide to be a minister, because we have to build institutional parliament so that if you are a parliamentarian, you are well safeguarded. And part of what we enjoy today as former members of parliament is thanks to one Kenyan who decided to do that. Now, the danger with these institutions is that all of them, they need to check each other. And I think we are not exceeding, because where our salvation is up to the other day has been in the judiciary, because judiciary is the custodian of the law. And they have once it is made through whatever means, whether it is through a referendum or through amendments in parliament, judiciary ought to be the custodian of the law. And if there are glaring irregularities, including the issue of gender, we do not expect judiciary not to listen to a Kenyan who says there is a problem here. There is gender imbalance, where ladies and where one gender is not fully represented to the extent of 1/3, where some of the regions were ignored totally, as if they do not have any professionals. And yet we know 9,000 people applied for these jobs. They filtered all the way to 150, then they added another 100, or some people, I don't know who came, and the majority of the said 100 are likely to be the beneficiaries of the 51 that were eventually appointed. So these are some of the issues that we are building our culture, we are building our history, and we must allow judiciary to play their role, because that is where Kenyans ought to go for any salvation. Even this issue of the 4 commissioners, I expect judiciary at the right time must also be allowed to play their role within the law. So that if the 4 made a mistake, that mistake should be expunged from our social fabric, from our culture. Because what I see every day is that we have increasing popularity of bad manners. And as long as bad manners is popular, we go with it. And the only way we can have is salvation from judiciary. Finally, on the issue of appointing, during Kibaki, we could source from, say, a certain organization, could be Price Waterhouse. We get 7, and the 7 are taken to the board, and the board will give us 3. And the minister from the 3, the minister was given the latitude who to choose, depending on the marks and other considerations. Because if you have, let's say, 30 parastatals, and you already know that we have 6 people from this region, and number 1 is from the same region, you have the latitude of choosing number 2, given any other consideration. I'm not saying ministers are not biased, but it was a very good guide. One time I was faced with a situation where somebody informed me that some play was done between the institution and the board, because my permanent secretary at that time, name withheld, was influencing to allow somebody to come through. So I insisted, let me get the list of 7. And when I got the list of 7, somebody was given 82. Among the 7 was taken all the way and was given 74. So I said, how did this person move? They told me there were major errors of calculation and minor errors. Well, the vocabulary notwithstanding, I was able to go to what the institution brought as number 1, number 2, number 3, because the board was manipulated to change the results in between. So these things happen in government, but what I can say, just to support what Professor has just said, is that for the last 10 years, these bad manners has pervaded the atmosphere, and it is likely to become the rule. And that's why you can see people trooping to Kenya Kwanza. They do not like Kenya Kwanza at all. They are looking for jobs. Anybody saying Kenya Kwanza today is a job seeker.
He's a job seeker.
Don't take him seriously. Because if I know I have the capacity to run an institution, why should I shout on rooftop about Kenya Kwanza? Why don't I apply and get the job if I believe Kenya Kwanza is the right position to be? That is the major problem about Kenyans.
Churchill Suba, let's hear from Churchill, Prof, then we come to you on the separation of powers.
Yeah, you know, it's a matter of great concern that we already lost during the 10 years of Jubilee administration, which this current administration was part and parcel of. We lost parliament. It worries me when the deputy president sets a timeline within which anybody who was allied to Azimio in Mount Kenya region must fall behind him. Yet, you know, such deadlines, in my view, should have been set around reducing the cost of living, you know. And this takes us back to the cartoon, the editorial cartoon in the Standard, that, you know, the basics of life have been, you know, shunted aside, and, you know, the priorities now being set by the president and his deputy are about, you know, violating Article 4 of the Constitution. You know, it is not for fun or for beautification purposes that Kenyans in their wisdom said in Article 34, Article 4 of the Constitution, that Kenya shall be a multi-party democratic state founded on the national values and aspirations espoused in Article 10. And among them is the rule of law. Among them is dignity, human dignity, respect for rights. Yet, you know, the priorities we see are aimed at undermining the independence of parliament. And by the way, the day the president convened the Kenya Kwanza parliamentary group, there was lack of quorum. Parliament had to postpone the sitting to 2:30. And I asked myself, this August House still claiming to be independent? How? Must the president convene on a day that the parliament should sit from morning to evening, full day? It tells you that, you know, we lost parliament, all pretenses aside. We now run the risk of losing the judiciary. It has been our pillar, and especially during, you know, the tenure of the immediate former Chief Justice, Maraga. They had their fights, but one beautiful thing about that fight is that it charted a separate path, a trajectory of autonomy in decisional making processes in the judiciary. Today, with the collapse of every other case that was still facing the high and mighty, you know, Kenyans are worried that is it just by mere coincidence? And that's why for me, I'm normally very observant. Even small things like graduation ceremonies. I observe them and later on ask my questions. Before the Kenya Kwanza won, before the elections, we saw the deputy president, for example, lose 200 million. If that was also one of the cases that fabricated, how come it went through the court process, decisions were made, and unfortunately not in his favor? How convenient is it that now that they are in power, the ODPP has just discovered that none of those cases has the evidential threshold to stand trial, And these are the questions we are asking. And, when such statements are presented before courts of law, we see the court also acquiescing to such, requests. And it worries us that, is it the promise, even though the former president, of course, undermined that by setting up the judiciary fund, or is it the pledge of 3 billion every financial year, in addition to the already established, judiciary fund that is making the judiciary pander to the whims of the executive? I got a little bit concerned that on the day of the official opening of Parliament, the Chief Justice and her deputy were standing meekly waiting for the arrival of the president. And whereas, yes, we expect it is a state function and so on, I mean, the two leaders of a supposedly independent arm of government standing beside the speakers of the National Assembly and the Senate and the Speaker of the Senate, to me was a pointer to things to come. That all these institutions is about money. As long as they are given, 3 billion every year, the executive can do whatever it wants and get away with it. And so Kenyans are watching very closely to see how some of the cases and appeals that are in court touching on the high and mighty will proceed. But already there are signs that, we risk losing the judiciary, our final, very final, pillar of justice, of ensuring that even if, injustices are committed against the vulnerable, we'll finally seek and find solace in the judiciary. That, for me, is under a lot of pressure and the threat of being lost. Yes.
Right. Let's hear from Professor.
Well, the system, you asked whether the judiciary is overplaying its hand with respect, for example, to appointments.
Yes, indeed.
And I'm saying it is not. The system we have, the checks and balances, the three arms of government, is originated after the French Revolution. The French were the first people to set up a republic and decide that wherever power is concentrated on one arm of government, it can be abused. So to avoid that abuse, they set up these three institutions to check one another. Now, when then is that check relevant? It's relevant when one of them overplayed its hand. And usually it's the other two which it does. Because when the president has not obeyed the law, the executive, that is, then the Kenyans now move to court to say that there is a violation. And I want to be hard on that violation. And the court hears you. So this is what happened in this situation. I don't know whether the court has lifted the suspension, whether that case has been decided on the appointment of the principal secretaries.
No.
Because what the petitioners felt was that out of 51, it was heavily threatened to one Central Kenya and Rift Valley. And they objected to that because Article 10 talks about inclusivity. They said that has not been obeyed. Article 232 talks about making sure all the Kenyan communities are given the opportunity in appointment and the promotion, of course, together with the people with disability. So they felt that there is violations on Article 10, on Article 232, and possibly on Article 27, because we all desire equal benefit of the law. So they felt aggrieved. They moved to court. When the court reacts now and it takes a decision, it's not overplaying its hand. It's doing what it's supposed to do, to check the executive. This is why we talk about the checks and balances, because for the society to move normal, Parliament must do its normal job. For example, the process now going on in Parliament or on the commissioners, IEBC, if it does not follow the law, the court will now come after they have done their job and correct that. So this is the role of the court. The court does not stop the executive from carrying out its functions. But when the functions are not carried out according to the law, then the court comes in and it says this did not follow the law. When the Parliament passes a law, for example, and that is the job of Parliament, the court will not interfere in the process of passing that law. But once that law is through, then the court will check whether it obeyed the constitution or not.
Exactly. That's the point. This is where now I think the point of the debate is emanating. Should it have followed the due process of going through Parliament, and then the court now will have come afterwards?
The court has to come afterwards because those are the arms.
So in this particular case, that's the question I was asking.
Yes.
Did the court overplay hands by intervening before it went through the process?
No. You see, you can't also allow the court can't come after the process already been evaluated. You see, the appointment, the mistake already done during the appointment.
So you correct before it goes
so
through the process.
So you correct before confirmation. You correct before it's confirmed. You are maybe because now they can take a decision. They can tell the president, please do it again. You understand? But if you wait until people are sworn in office, that is now after the fact. It becomes difficult because now the law of contract comes in. I'm not in a contractual relationship. And you say that I was not appointed according to law, I don't know gender. That's now what they call them ex facto. Okay? So the court in this situation must intervene before confirmation because the action has already been taken, appointment has already occurred. And that is in error, so the court must intervene to correct that. So we have to get used to the court intervention. The court doesn't, before the appointment, the court was not involved. No. So even the parliament, the court can't be involved when the parliament is interpreting a law. There's the Meron governor went to court the other day. I don't know who is advising her because she went to stop impeachment motion. There's no court that will do that. The court will allow the motion to go through. Then the court will look whether the motion followed the laying down procedures in law.
Yeah.
But the court cannot stop the debate on that motion. The court cannot stop Parliament from making a law, but Parliament can strike out that law if it is unconstitutional. The court will not stop the president from making an appointment. He will make an appointment, but the court can declare that appointment null and void after it has done. So this is our system, and we wish that to strengthen it, so that these institutions can play their rightful role in society, because then we will have an harmonious society. We will have a society that actually is guided by rule of law, and we have a society which trusts and believes in these institutions. Because Jubilee was able to mess up the country because it captured the parliament completely. There is nothing. During the 10 years of Jubilee that went to that parliament and it wasn't defeated because it was anti-Kenyan. Nothing. Even those punitive laws, they passed. Anything that Jubilee took to that parliament went through.
Thank you.
You know, Ibal, it is
then we prepare our headline thoughts.
It's tragic that we are discussing this and most now focusing on courts when the appointing authority, swore to protect the constitution. We are currently at a 3-day conference that is ending today, and the focus is Utu. That is Utu not about honesty. Is it Utu about truthfulness? The tragedy of this case in court is that even after signing a charter, with the women folk and making it, public, appointments are still done as if, those charters do not matter, that even the oath we took, the mere fact that, Parliament cannot impeach the president because he has the numbers, but this is a violation of the Constitution or an attempt to violate the Constitution. So and yet, the same people speak loudest about conmanship. What is there any other conmanship different from this? Because these things that we bandy around in political rallies, is what we practice. And then we move about life as shamelessly as if we have not breached the Constitution. And part of the discussion at the conference is how can we as a country, and the conference has been convened under the auspices of Uraia, and Uraia has done a lot of civic education in this country, trying to entrench a culture of constitutionalism, in partnership with the Kenya National Interface Team. So we are trying to say, yes, this is a Kenyan problem. Dishonesty is a Kenyan problem. When, for example, Azimio nominated Martha Karua as running mate, subsequent opinion polls indicated that he did not appear to excite the women folk, And I think that's partly why the president seemed not to care, because these things do not matter anyway. Whether, he appoints 50% of his cabinet, 50% of principal secretaries as women, will not matter in 2027. You will never get punished for it. They are not things that ring a bell in the minds of Kenyans and so on.
Thank you.
And I'm saying that because in the Standard today, page 20 and 21, there's a list of people who have applied to be members of the Commission on Revenue Allocation. And going through it, you can clearly see those who will be shortlisted. These are the full list of applicants. But there's a reason why the people who have done the shortlist, in their wisdom, have bothered to create a column for the county. Because we live in a society where ethnic sensitivity is still alive and here is with us. So we want to see, when the shortlisting is done, that the same parameters are reflected in the shortlist. When the appointments are finally done, that they conform to the dictates and requirements of Article 232. But when the appointing authority ignores all that, and the answer is that not all Kenyans, we wanted this number, and not all Kenyans, all tribes can fit into that, is an explanation that does not fly.
Thank you. Right, let's just get our headline thoughts from Kipruto, Professor, and finally Churchill, 30 seconds.
Well, this is our country, and being our country, we do expect that each and every individual shall respect the law, regardless of his station in life, whether you are high and mighty, or you are low and lowly, you shall respect the law. And the culture that we build today will determine the future of our children.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor.
I wanted to associate myself with Honorable Kirwa on adherence to the rule of law. We need a peaceful country. We need a country where we feel that the law is on our side, all of us. And therefore, we think that everything the state does, we need to do that according to the law.
Right, thank you. All right. Churchill.
Yes, my thoughts are with the candidates. We have 3 sets of candidates in this country sitting for Kenya Certificate of Primary Education Examinations, Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education, and of course those in Class 6 under the CBC that will also be writing the exams. Young people seem to have lost hope in this country. And some of these things that preoccupy us in this discussion and that has taken the time of these panelists are the very reason for which they have become, pessimistic. We want to tell them and assure them that things will never remain the same, things will change. Let them embrace hard work and believe that hard work and not working smart is what will finally get them out of the current state of despair in which they seem to be.
Thank you. And also, I'll be remiss if you don't really talk about today being, the beginning of the 16 days of gender-based violence, and the activism begins today. There's a special report there in the Standard from the civil society. I don't know what also you've prepared. This will culminate, or it will culminate, I should say, to the 10th of December, where also that will be the International Human Rights Day. So this is what also you have in the Standard today. You want to pick up a copy of that. This is rising and getting out of control. It's everybody's business to make a difference on gender violence. It says discussing the tenets of healthy coupling and friendships with your friends can help them recognize abuse. It's important to make or to take the lead and influence your peers by challenging traditional attitudes towards physical abuse. And also you're given here 5 types of gender-based violence. It's not just the domestic one. We have domestic violence, which is 41% of married women and 11% of married men in Kenya have reported being victims of either domestic violence or sexual abuse. We also have sexual violence. 14% of Kenyan women and 6% of men aged between 15 and 49 have experienced sexual violence at least once in their lifetime. Sexual, psychological, and physical exploitation and abuse. 32% of boys and 34% of girls aged 13 to 17 experience emotional violence, e.g. being told the parents wish they had never been born. That is another form of violence as well. Female genital mutilation. 4 million or 1 in 5 women and girls have been subjected to FGM. In some communities, this rises as high as 94%. We have socio-economic violence, taking away the earnings, academic credentials of the victims, not allowing them to work or making them unfit for work throughout targeted abuse as well. That is another form of gender-based violence as well. I was wondering, does also disappointment when you talk about the gender parity, could we liken it to a form of, I don't know, looking at some of, the highlights here as well, it falls there, Yeah, okay, equal pay for equal work as well. That's the thing that we're really talking about as well. So also be keeping your eyes peeled here on KTN News, where we shall be focusing on that also from most of our bulletins as well. At around also 9 o'clock, we shall be having the CS of public service and the gender. This is Aisha Jomo as well. We'll be highlighting what also is up there, collective slaves, on this material day, on making sure that gender-based violence is completely, of course, eliminated, and we stanch this flaw in our society as well. I wonder if most of us also join the Maendeleo Wanaume, led by Njoka. I think it will be a good point now to wind up the show and follow through to find out how many people have been in this particular Maendeleo Wanaume as well. Njoka, you should come and tell us about this today, because even men are being beaten. Yes. Right? He's been advocating for that as well. Thank you very much for your valued company.